Hello guys, this is Zombie and today we'll react to a new series about one of the greatest generals in history, not Napoleon, but another one, Hannibal Barca. This is a series by HistoryMarche and let's go!
As a fan of our channel, you should definitely check out our friends over at CuriosityStream, my personal favorite streaming service that features thousands of documentaries geared towards the lifelong quest to learn, explore and understand. I've been subscribed to CuriosityStream for over 2 years now, and I can highly recommend their history documentaries, which features topics from ancient, medieval and more modern times. As our subscribers, you get free access to the entire library of documentaries on CuriosityStream. Click on the link in the description and register with the code HistoryMarche to get 30 days of free unlimited access to thousands of documentaries on CuriosityStream.
To support HistoryMarche.
And by registering, you'll also be supporting our channel.
Hannibal Barca, Rome greatest enemy, Part 1, Road to Rome.
After General Hasdrubal the Fair was assassinated by a
I will react also to the first Punic War, but later.
Celtic slave, 26-year-old Hannibal was elected as the new Carthaginian commander. The young general immediately made plans to invade Rome, but he couldn't begin the campaign before strengthening Carthage's control over the Iberian Peninsula. So Hannibal went to work. He launched 2 highly successful campaigns in 221 and 220 BC, extending Carthaginian influence beyond the Tagus River. But while on the return route to New Carthage, Hannibal was taken by surprise by a coalition of Iberian tribes. Led by the Carpetani tribe, the Iberians assembled a large army. They blocked Hannibal's path and fortified their position against the Tagus River. Then,
for context, Iberians are natives from Spain. Basically, that's that. From Spain, Portugal.
Waited for the Carthaginian general to attack. Here, Hannibal showed his military genius for the first time. Instead of attacking the Iberians head-on, he erected his own fortified camp and waited. By day's end, his scouts found a river crossing to the southeast. During the wee hours of the night, Hannibal ordered a small contingent to stay in the camp and keep all campfires burning, creating the illusion that the whole Carthaginian army was still encamped. Meanwhile, he led his army on a swift flanking maneuver further up the river. By sunrise the next day, Hannibal was behind the Iberian position, feigning retreat towards New Carthage. Thinking that the Carthaginians were retreating, the Iberians rushed to intercept them. But once they were midstream, Hannibal sprung his trap and unleashed his cavalry. Iberian infantrymen, chest deep in
go behind the enemy lines and flank. That's all the tactics, but it works. Something don't as my accent is strong, is thick, don't hesitate to put subtitles on if you to understand better if there is any audio understanding issues from you.
Fast-flowing river couldn't offer much resistance and were cut down with ease by the Carthaginian cavalry charge. Those who managed to cross were trampled by the elephants. By now the Iberian army lost all cohesion and the mass of tribal warriors started fleeing. Hannibal ordered his army to pursue them across the river.
Honestly, the strategy to flank, but at the timing when the enemy crossed the river, that's something not so common. That's a smart move.
Completely routing the enemy.
I never heard of
On the Tagus River, Hannibal had his first major victory. But Rome took notice. Wanting to stop Hannibal's expansion, the Romans made their presence felt. Already allied with the wealthy and powerful city of Saguntum, Rome declared it their protectorate. an act that Hannibal perceived as a violation of the treaty signed by the two great powers in 225 BC, which divided the Iberian Peninsula along the Ebro River into Carthaginian and Roman spheres of influence. A sworn enemy of Rome, it didn't take long before Hannibal acted. He marched on Saguntum and besieged the city. In 219 BC, the Carthaginian army reached the outskirts of Saguntum. The city was heavily fortified, situated atop steep slopes and cliffs, high above the surrounding plain. Saguntines requested aid from Rome, but the Romans were busy fighting the Illyrians. Nevertheless, with provisions stockpiled, Saguntum was prepared. Besieging it would not be easy. Hannibal installed a blockade around the entire city and placed most of his forces at the western end. Saguntines stubbornly kept pushing every Carthaginian assault back, but the siege went on for months, and the many assaults gradually wore down portions of the wall. Eventually, the defenders had to abandon their outer defenses and form up behind the inner wall. Slowly and relentlessly, Hannibal's army made progress. And after 8 brutal months, the Saguntines made their last stand at the citadel. Soon after, the city fell. Inhabitants that survived the siege were either killed or sold into slavery.
Damn.
After the fall of Saguntum, Rome demanded justice for what they perceived was the violation of the treaty, and, claiming that Saguntum was in the Roman sphere of influence according to the treaty, they asked...
So there were basically two Ebro rivers, this one and this one. And so, okay, so it led to...
Carthage to hand over Hannibal to Rome, so he can be punished. But the Carthaginian Senate stood by their general, and by the end of the year, the Second Punic War began.
So it all started just because of a river, of two rivers named Ebro, and so they had a territorial dispute over that, misunderstanding of a treaty, and it's all that needed to start a war. It's crazy.
So he can be punished. But the Carthaginian Senate stood by their general, and by the end of the year, the Second Punic War began.
Cross a river, it means war.
Hannibal wintered in New Carthage, preparing for the upcoming campaign. He placed his brother Hasdrubal in charge of Iberia, with 15,000 troops and 21 elephants, along with a fleet of ships to protect the coastline. To break possible tribal allegiances, around 15,000 Iberian infantry were swapped for 15,000 African infantry, who were more reliable, sending the Iberians to Carthage and Libya to bolster defenses against a possible Roman landing. And in the spring of 218 BC, with the full support from the Senate, Hannibal marched out of New Carthage with 54,000 infantry and 8,000 cavalry, dividing his army into 3 columns. But beyond the Ebro, tribes allied to Rome were hostile to the Carthaginians, and it took Hannibal about 2 months to pacify the region. He put 1,000 troops under the command of Hanno, ordering him to establish a line of defense on the Ebro against possible incursions into Carthaginian territory. With 38,000 infantry, 7,000 cavalry, and 37 elephants left at his disposal, Hannibal crossed the mountains and encamped on the other side of the Pyrenees.
That's crazy. I don't know much about Hannibal. I know less than about Napoleon. But yeah, I know that he's famous for having, besides his army, also war elephants. That's something more exotic. We don't accept it usually. And also, to link up with Napoleon, is that Hannibal, fun fact, is that Hannibal was one of the historical figures Napoleon was inspired by. He read a lot of books, and especially about great conquerors of the past, including Hannibal. And I don't know if you already saw the picture. I think I will show it on the video. Is that you see the painting with Napoleon on a horseback in the Alps. Napoleon crossing of the Alps, and in fact, it's engraved in a rock on the ground. Hannibal. This is a reference to Hannibal, a direct reference to him when he crossed the Alps, because I know that Hannibal is famous. It's like one of the first to cross the Alps in a successful way. And so it was a reference to that when Napoleon also crossed the Alps during the Italian campaign. By the way, if you are interested, watch my playlist about Napoleon. I will put it in the description and maybe in the pinned comments. I did a few videos yet. I will complete it more after the Napoleon reactions too. And so you can watch the episode and you will see Napoleon also cross the Alps. And by the way, don't hesitate if you want to watch my history videos to subscribe and see my journey and learn together about history. You can also in comments give me recommendations of videos. I would be pleased to watch content that people want to see, the historical stuff. And also, it's a bit premature, but I will do at some point when I have enough big community streams. I will stream on Twitch and do more broader content, not only historical content. So don't hesitate to subscribe, to like the video for the insight that I give, or if you want to support the channel. So let's go.
Meanwhile, the Romans divided their forces. Their plan was to send Consul Publius Cornelius Scipio to intercept Hannibal in Iberia. Simultaneously, Consul Tiberius Sempronius Longus sailed to Sicily with the intent of attacking Carthage itself if Scipio managed to stop Hannibal's advance. Additional Roman forces were left to guard the recently conquered Gallic lands in the Po Valley, a region the Romans called Cisalpine Gaul. Back at the foot of the Pyrenees Mountains, Hannibal laid the groundwork for the invasion.
So basically, the northwest part of Italy was called the Cisalpine Gaul. So it was part of Gallic territory that is more or less modern day France, if you can say it like that. And so it was from the same culture. So we are in the same way, they are descendants of Gaul, northwestern Italians, or like our brothers in a way.
Rather than fighting his way towards Rome, he did everything to avoid conflict with the Gallic tribes, mostly paying them for free passage through their territory, promising that his only interest is to fight Rome. Moreover, Carthaginian messengers returning from the Po Valley assured Hannibal that the Gallic tribes there would welcome him, and that they had already begun hostilities against Rome in anticipation of his arrival. This was welcome news for Hannibal, because he knew the Po Valley could provide more manpower and act as a staging point for operations into Roman territory. As Hannibal approached the river Rhone, Scipio's army disembarked at Massalia to resupply, while on their way to Iberia.
If I'm not mistaken, is the river, this Italian river or something. So the Po Valley is after the Alps, the valley.
The Roman general knew that Hannibal crossed the Pyrenees, but he wrongly estimated that the Carthaginian general was still far from the Rhone. In truth, Hannibal's army was only 4 days' march away from Massalia.
It's crazy how they
Hannibal rested his army for 3 days in hostile territory and began preparations to cross the Rhone.
They are just beside, and he says it's like southeast France, and it's like 4 days. It's fucking huge.
4 days' march away from Massalia.
Sorry for my bad words. Sorry, YouTube.
Hannibal
I won't
rested
say
his
anything.
army for 3 days in hostile territory and began preparations to cross the Rhone. With the Roman army just 4 days away, Hannibal wanted to avoid a set-piece battle with the Gauls, eager to press on towards the Italian peninsula as soon as possible. But on the opposite riverbank, encamped was the army of the Cavaras tribe, a Roman ally. They gathered all their boats and built a barrier on the riverbank in preparation to contest the Carthaginian crossing. But Hannibal devised a cunning plan. On the third night, under the cover of darkness, he sent a flanking detachment under the command of Hanno, son of Bomilcar, some 40 kilometers, 25 miles, north. Hanno crossed the river and rested his troops for 1 day.
Classique.
On the
Classic
second
weapon.
night, after leaving the Carthaginian camp, Hanno's detachment...
I say classic, but honestly, the enemies don't always do that. I mean, people. But you see here, the Gauls don't do that. This allied tribe
again
to the
moved
Romans.
during the night,
They don't do
eventually
this
deploying
sneaking.
behind the Cavaras camp at dawn.
They should
The trap
be
was set.
prepared to that.
Early next morning, Hanno used smoke to signal Hannibal to start crossing the Rhone. As the Carthaginian vessels were lowered into the massive river, Cavaras' army formed a line on the opposite riverbank.
It's not very discreet. I'm wondering what if they saw the signal. The Gauls should have seen it too, and should have
Hannibal was
alerted
one
them.
of the first to cross, to the roars and cheers from his men on the western bank. As the
Hannibal,
Carthaginians started
Hannibal.
disembarking on the eastern riverbank, Hanno sent a part of his force to loot and destroy the Cavaras camp, while he personally led the charge against the Gauls near the river. The Cavaras were stunned by the flanking maneuver, and they began fleeing the field in panic, unable to cope with Hannibal's perfectly while he personally
came-
led the charge against the Gauls near the river. The Cavaras were stunned by the flanking
I don't claim these Gauls. Guys, you saw a big cloud, a big signal cloud, and you didn't understand that it was the enemy behind. Ah no, bro. I'm ashamed of you.
maneuver, and they began fleeing the field in panic, unable to cope with Hannibal's perfectly synchronized attacks. With the Gauls scattered, the battle was soon over, and the Carthaginians hastily proceeded to cross the river. Most of Hannibal's troops crossed the Rhone by the end of the day, while it took another day to get the elephants across the river. While the Carthaginian army gathered on the eastern bank, friendly Gallic messengers from the tribes in the Po Valley arrived, warning
So
Hannibal
Po
that a
Valley, I was
Roman
right.
fleet is anchored
So-
nearby. Hannibal sent his scouts to locate Scipio's army, and, incredibly, not long after, his Numidian scouts stumbled into a Roman Gallic scouting party. Both generals now knew of each other's whereabouts.
Wait, Numidians, I think they are like black Africans, like from... Okay, so we had black Africans from... not only North Africans, okay. I think Numidians are black Africans.
Scipio quickly moved north to confront Hannibal, but by the time the Romans reached the crossing point a few days later, only an empty Carthaginian camp was left behind. Hannibal had no time to waste. He had to reach the Alps before the winter. But trouble was brewing in Iberia. Scipio placed his brother, Gnaeus Cornelius Scipio Calvus, in charge of leading the army into Iberia, while he headed back to the Po Valley to assume command of Roman troops there and prepare for the Carthaginian invasion. Scipio Calvus, now in charge of the invasion force, disembarked at Emporiae. The Greek trading cities and the Iberian tribes in the region welcomed the Romans. But even prior to the arrival of Roman troops, the Carthaginians began to lose control over the conquered region, as Hanno's force wasn't large enough to conduct offensive operations. What's worse, Hanno only learned about the Roman arrival when Scipio Calvus was well on his way towards the Ebro River. He sent word to Hasdrubal, who...
Wait, Rhodes. Is it the famous Rhodes city? No, I think that's another one. But yeah, the Romans are... I mean, this Roman general, I think, is blundering because, yeah, you conquer, but you weaken your best... you weaken your main force against the enemy base general. All of that to conquer here, but yeah, at the same time, the guy will conquer you. And also, it's not even the heartland of Carthage. That's like that's the European territory, but their capital is in North Africa. So
began marching north with 8,000 infantry
not
and
everyone can
1,000
be a
cavalry.
great general.
But instead of waiting for Hasdrubal, Hanno marched out with 10,000 troops to meet the 20,000 strong Roman army. Scipio Calvus easily crushed the Carthaginians, killing 6,000 and capturing 2,000 troops, along with Hanno himself. Once Hasdrubal arrived, he didn't have enough troops to meet the Romans in battle, so he launched fast-moving raids along the coast. Carthaginian raiders killed many Roman sailors as they were foraging, reducing the effectiveness of the Roman fleet by half. Nevertheless, Rome now had full control over Iberia, north of the Ebro River, a serious blow to the Carthaginian war effort. Moreover, northern Iberia would become a base of operations for Roman incursions into Carthaginian territory south of the Ebro River. Meanwhile, having marched his forces over the Alps, Hannibal would soon turn the Italian peninsula into a war zone, in a campaign that would elevate him to a general of legendary status.
Wait, they don't talk about his crossing? His legendary crossing? Weird. Price of death on the battlefield is to depart from life.
It is the year 218 BC. As Roman legions under consul Tiberius Sempronius Longus sail south to invade Carthage itself, Gnaeus Cornelius Scipio Calvus is consolidating Rome's position in Iberia, while his brother, consul Publius Cornelius Scipio, rushes back to the Po Valley to take command of the Roman army there and stop Hannibal.
Scipio brothers L.
Both sides are confident of victory.
Yeah, but the setup isn't in favor of your Romans. They divided too much for nothing.
Although the Carthaginians are faced with serious setbacks in Iberia, in Gaul, Hannibal speeds up his approach to the Alps when he befriends the Allobroges tribe by adjudicating in a dispute between two royal brothers over who should rule.
Ah, so they will talk about the
seemingly
crossing.
grateful new ruler of the tribe, Brancus the Elder, provides the Carthaginians with supplies, warm clothes, food, and guides.
Nice.
And so begins Hannibal's perilous journey through the Alps. But as the ascent begins, Brancus's friendly guides turn home. Here, Hannibal shows he is as skillful in mind games as he is in generalship.
No, totally
Sensing an
not
ambush,
suspect.
he sends scouts ahead who report that the tribesmen are indeed mustering their forces just ahead on higher ground near their settlement, waiting to attack the passing Carthaginian column. With a select group of experienced troops, Hannibal sneaks up to a position overlooking the tribal settlement and plans his next move. As night falls, he signals his army to proceed marching. Spotting the movement, tribal sentries raise the alarm and, just as Hannibal had hoped, an attack begins on the Carthaginian column. Expecting the impending attack, Carthaginian troops below stand fast on the precipice. A swarm of tribal warriors smashes into their solid defensive line, the initial push throwing many over the cliff's edge.
Not attacking, but
The Carthaginians hold their ground, and the tribesmen soon realize that they have fallen into a trap. Hannibal rushes downhill, while Carthaginian troops from below simultaneously begin pushing uphill. Many tribesmen are cut down in a matter of minutes.
So basically, if I get right the Hannibal will say trademark, it's like to have his main army, and so the enemy is focused on the main army, but he's sneaking a small portion of his army behind the enemy lines, and then bam, when the enemy attacks his main army, bam, he goes he rush on them from behind and wreck them. Okay, so that's his third trademark. Like Napoleon is defeat in detail. So certain strategy. His trademark seems to be that. For now, at least.
Their morale broken by the lightning-fast Carthaginian counterattack. With the enemy driven off, Hannibal and his men turn their attention towards the village. They storm the tribal settlement and seize all of their winter provisions. At dawn, the Carthaginian march resumes. Over the following 3 days, the marching column continues unopposed. But all that changes on the 4th day as the Carthaginians enter a narrow gorge where they are met by several tribal chiefs who offer friendship, hostages, and guides. Suspecting that the Gallic tribes from these parts are no friendlier, Hannibal accepts their offer, but takes precautions by secretly moving the vulnerable baggage train and cavalry.
Yeah, bro, you already got trapped. Yeah, that's probably very sus again.
To the front of the column and positions his heavy infantry in the rear. As the Carthaginian march continues through the extremely narrow pass, the 200-meter vertical cliffs ominously tower over them. And they are not alone. The Gallic warriors are watching from above. Having set up an ambush further up the gorge, the tribesmen bide their time, shadowing Hannibal's army for 2 days. But suddenly, at a very narrow point in the gorge, the Carthaginian column gets blocked from the front as the tribesmen unleash their attack. Rocks and projectiles rain down from the cliffs above onto the Carthaginians below, killing...
Bro, honestly, this is a very well-made trap. More sophisticated than the others. That's crazy. And I wonder how Hannibal will sort this thing out, because road is blocked. There are people throwing them rocks from the top, but they can't fight them. So maybe their only option is to pull back, but maybe there is enemies waiting, I don't know. So it sounds like, at least the crossing sounds like impossible.
Many in the process. Animals panic and trample over soldiers who hopelessly look for cover. The main Gallic force appears behind the Carthaginian column and charges their rear, expecting weakest resistance there as they...
Yeah, I suppose on paper that's an hopeless situation. Normally, Hannibal is done.
...hope to loot and destroy their supply train.
But he anticipated the attack from
Hannibal
behind.
proves he is one step ahead of his opponents, as the heavy Carthaginian infantry he previously placed in the rear pushes back the Gallic charge and inflicts heavy losses.
The enemies don't accept an attack from behind, but him, even from friendly Gallic people, he accepts from behind an attack and anticipate it. So yeah, that shows the difference between normal army and against a great general.
The enemy, forcing them to retreat after a brief battle. Hannibal then urges his men to push forward out of the killing zone as the barrage of rocks from above continues.
Wait,
it is not until one day later, Rock then urges his men to push forward. Hannibal then urges his men to push forward out of the killing zone as the barrage of rocks from above continues.
How did they get rid of that?
It is not until one day later that the Carthaginians finally reach safety on the other side of the gorge.
While being shot? Okay. It was a weak barrage or... Well...
The last of the Allobrosia's attacks is beaten off, but the remorseless fighting against the Gallic tribes took its toll on Hannibal's army. To make matters worse, the weather soon turns as winter comes early. Hannibal's troops find themselves battling heavy snowstorms. Traversing through rocky gorges and steep mountain slopes, many are swallowed by treacherous voids lurking just under the snowfall. Men, animals, and wagons slip and slither on the ice towards precipitous ravines and treacherous chasms. Finally, 9 days into the march, the Carthaginians set up camp just below the top of the pass as they wait for stragglers to catch up. 2 days later, Hannibal rallies his troops at the top and points to the panorama of Italy below. There he vows to his men, "You will have the capital of Italy, the citadel of Rome, in the hollow of your hands."
It's funny because it reminds me of Napoleon. He did a proclamation when they invaded Italy with his army. He promised Italy to the army that they would get rich, etc. So that's okay. That's an interesting echo to Hannibal, I guess.
And with that, they begin descending towards the Po Valley. But the slopes on the way down are far steeper and largely covered in ice. The treacherous terrain claims the lives of many more troops and animals. Adding to the hardship, a collapsed stretch of road forces the Carthaginian column to stop for 3 days amidst freezing conditions while the road is repaired. But finally, after braving these horrific conditions, the Carthaginians reach the foot of the Alps. Having lost nearly half of his army, Hannibal takes stock of his troops who suffered terribly during the crossing. Of the 45,000 that set off through the Alps just 16 days ago, only 26,000 made it to the other side. There, the Roman army awaits.
So this is the end of the first episode of this series. Now Hannibal by HistoryMarche. If you don't want to miss any next episode, don't forget to subscribe, like the video to support my channel, and I tell you, see you next time.